Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're studying the words of the Buddha and moving into transforming the three poisons, which is part of chapter 8 in this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is volume 1 of our book series, and we're using this as a guide in our group learning program, that each Sunday I'm going through each chapter by chapter, to help you develop your life practice and a really strong foundation on the path to enlightenment, all sourced from the original teachings of the Buddha using his own words. So today we're moving into understanding the three poisons, or the three unwholesome roots, or the three fires. These are three individual high-level pollutions that the Buddha discovered that's keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. And by understanding what these are and what the remedies are to eradicate them from the mind can move to this enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, no longer experiencing discontent feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. And as the mind is eliminating these pollutions, this is why you start experiencing a high degree of focus, concentration, clarity of mind, and deep memory, because the mind is no longer plagued by these pollutions. So I'm going to walk you through today, helping you understand each one of these individual pollutions and then what the actual remedies are for them. When you first started learning with me, I helped you to understand the Four Noble Truths. That's the very beginning of the path to enlightenment. If you've been studying with me for any length of time, you would have learned the Four Noble Truths as the very beginning teaching to get started. And this gives you a certain window into the unenlightened mind and helping you to understand what's causing these discontent feelings. But now we're going to take it a level deeper, going into the three poisons, which is going to help you to get a broader understanding of what the real problems are in the unenlightened mind. And then you also learned the 10 fetters, which is a much deeper description. This is the way that the Buddha teaches. There's these layers of teachings that he teaches. And the 10 fetters are the ultimate individual description of the individual pollutions that are in the mind, and they need to be eradicated in order to get to enlightenment. And they bubble up to these three poisons, or these three unwholesome roots, or these three fires. And when I teach, I always share with students at the very beginning, when they first start, is to never believe the teachings, because your goal isn't to believe the teachings. The Buddha didn't teach a bunch of beliefs. He didn't teach rules or commandments. You're not to believe a whole bunch of things and then hope something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning his teachings, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and you're practicing them in order to transform the mind. In here, you're going to learn about transforming these three poisons. And the way that you do that is that you awaken to the wisdom of the Buddha, not belief, because belief, you don't know what's true or false. So the Buddha didn't share a bunch of beliefs, but he shared truths that you can independently verify through your learning, your reflection, and then through practicing, you'll see the condition of your mind gradually improving. And you also did this as it relates to certain natural laws as you were growing up. The Buddha taught the natural laws of existence, and you're awakening to the wisdom of those natural laws. And as you were growing up, you lacked wisdom of the natural law of gravity, and this is why you struggled and had difficulties related to this natural law. You fell down, you hit your head, you bumped your elbow, you tripped and fell, you broke things things like this were occurring, and we were really struggling and having difficulties as we were growing up as children. But then slowly but surely, we gradually awoke to the wisdom of this natural law of gravity, that by the time we were 10 or 12, we understood to tie our shoes really tight. We looked at the surface of the sidewalk more closely. We didn't bounce around so much and jumping around so much. We awoke to the wisdom of this natural law because we saw the truth for ourselves. And this natural law was affecting us whether we were aware of it or not. But when we lacked wisdom of this natural law, we made unwise decisions that produced unwholesome results. When we had wisdom, as we cultivated that over a period of years, we then started making wiser decisions that produced wholesome results. And this is the same thing that needs to happen in order to awaken the mind to enlightenment. Is there's this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress where you're learning certain teachings, you're independently reflecting on those to verify them, and you're practicing them to acquire wisdom. Because these natural laws of existence are affecting you, whether you're aware of them or not. These natural laws are going to impact the way that your mind functions and the way that things are experienced in the world. So if you lack wisdom of these natural laws, you will naturally make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. But conversely, when you gain wisdom of these natural laws, you will naturally make wiser decisions that produce wholesome results in your life. And now you can experience this ease and peacefulness and joy because the mind can be enlightened where it never experiences any discontent feelings. Because when the mind's angered, feeling sadness and frustration and irritation and all these other discontent feelings, an individual is struggling in the world. And as you are struggling with those difficulties that you're experiencing, then life can feel like a real burden and feel real miserable. But as you awaken your mind to the wisdom, you no longer struggle and have difficulties because you understand these natural laws and how they function around you, and you'll make wiser and wiser decisions that lead to more and more wholesome results in your life. So I'd like to welcome all of you to our class today and invite you to ask any and all questions as we go in our class. You can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see your questions. You can put those into the comment section. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. I'm going to be using some visual aids to help me share this content with you to be able to learn these three poisons or these three unwholesome roots or the three fires. And the first thing I'm going to share with you is just kind of a basic understanding of what the three poisons are so that you can start with just a general understanding from a high level of what they are. And then we're going to go into talking about them individually and what the solutions are to uproot them so that you can move the mind closer and closer to the enlightened mental state. So we refer to these as the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots or the three fires. Some people refer to them as defilements or taints. This is all ways to describe what's in the unenlightened mind and keeping it in the unenlightened state. It describes the pollution in the unenlightened mind. It also explains why one is experiencing unwholesome results in their life or unwholesome karma. That when you make decisions through these three poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality, you will make unwise decisions that produce unwholesome results. And this unwholesome results is referred to unwholesome karma. You might have heard this referred to as karma if you have studied any of the teachings in Sanskrit, for example. That's a different language. The original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So somebody who studies the original teachings of the Buddha might use the word karma. Well, if this translated to one English word, I would just use that English word because it would be much easier for me to share it in that way. But there is no English word that karma will translate to, because the way that you understand karma is its cause and effect or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. It's not this black cloud following you around. It's not mystical or magical. It's not punishments and rewards. There's no being that's deciding or no entity that is deciding who gets punished and who gets rewarded. Instead, it's the results of your decisions. That's what the natural law of karma is cause and effect or action and result. Every decision that you make, there's going to be some result or some effect that you're going to experience. And that's why the more wisdom you have of these natural laws, you'll be able to make wiser and wiser decisions that lead to wholesome results. The three poisons or three unwholesome roots or three fires, they explain the problems that are in the unenlightened mind, and eliminating these problems, one can experience the enlightened mental state. You can solve the problems of these three poisons by applying what we refer to as the antidotes. So if we talk about them as poisons, somebody might describe the remedies or the solutions that solve these as antidotes. Or if someone might talk about these as the three unwholesome roots, somebody might talk about the solutions as the three wholesome roots. Or if someone's talking about these as three fires, they might be talking about extinguishing these fires with these three certain qualities that need to be practiced in order to eradicate these pollutions of the three poisons, the craving, anger, and ignorance. And as I mentioned, it's the 10 fetters that is the most detailed description of these individual pollutions that are in the mind, or taints or defilements. So you'll hear people refer to these in different ways. Ultimately, you're going to need to know the 10 fetters in detail, but right now, at this point in our program, about halfway through, it's better to just kind of go in layer by layer the way that the Buddha taught in order to get a wider and wider perspective, but also a deeper perspective of what's going on in the unenlightened mind so that you can solve it. So as you're applying the antidotes or the solutions or the remedies, we might refer to these as the three wholesome roots. And when you make decisions through the three wholesome roots, it produces wholesome karma. Because when you're making decisions through the unwholesome roots, it's going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. Because the choices are being made through craving, which tends to have selfishness in there, the anger and hostility, and the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. When you're making decisions through that, it's going to produce unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. But when you are practicing the wholesome roots, which you're going to hear are generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, then you're going to be producing wise decisions that ultimately produce wholesome results. So now what I'm going to do is explain these three poisons to you from a higher level and just help you understand what all three of them are from somewhat of a higher level. Then I'm going to go into each one individually and explain to you what they are individually and what the actual remedies or the antidotes are to each of these individual poisons or these pollutions. So the craving, anger, and ignorance, which you'll hear some people refer to it in that way, or you might hear greed, hatred, and delusion, or you might hear desire, ill will, or confusion, or misunderstanding. Different people refer to these in different ways because we're translating what the Buddha shared, and different people use different words. Essentially, what these three poisons are doing, or these three unwholesome roots, or these three fires, is it's hindering the mind from experiencing this awakenedness, this higher consciousness where the mind can be peaceful and joyful permanently for the rest of this life. It motivates non-virtuous and unskillful intentions, speech, and actions. It produces all unwholesome karma, and they need to be transformed or eliminated or eradicated from the mind to be able to experience that brightness and radiance of the enlightened mind so that that can shine through. But as long as the mind is plagued with this pollution, it's burdening the mind and it's not able to experience the radiance and the brightness and the joy of the enlightened mind. So what craving or greed or this desire, attachment is, this is the mind's selfishness. This is the longing, the yearning, the grasping for contentedness or satisfaction outside of yourself, thinking that something external is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind has this longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of its affection. And if it gets what it wants, it will get pleasant feelings. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets these painful feelings. And then there's these neither painful nor pleasant feelings that it can experience. The pleasant feelings are things like conditioned happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. Then there's the painful feelings, which are things like anger, the frustration, the sadness, the fear, the grief, the misery. All of that is very painful to experience. Then there's the neither painful nor pleasant feelings like shyness. Shyness, it's neither painful, it's neither pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. Or you might think of dissatisfaction or uncomfortableness. This is all neither painful nor pleasant. So the cravings, desire, attachments, they're motivating the mind to long and yearn and chase after the objects of its affection. And ultimately, it thinks if it gets this thing, that it's going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. But ultimately, the mind is going to end up in the painful feelings, because as long as it's chasing, it's going to sometimes get what it wants, which is the pleasant feelings. But as soon as those conditions change, it's going to end up in the painful feelings. But also, if it's chasing after the objects of its affection and it doesn't get what it wants, then it's going to also end up in the painful feelings. So the mind is just stuck in this continuous cycle of going around and around and around, chasing its cravings, desires, attachments. And again, if it doesn't get what it wants, it ends up in this anger, this hatred, this ill will. This is the hostility or the aggression. Also, there's aversion here where the mind is pushing things away. You might be pushing people away or pushing situations away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. So the mind has this hostility or aggression or this bitterness, thinking that this external thing, either a person or a situation, is causing the painful feelings. So those things are pushed away, thinking that that's going to actually solve the problem, when it doesn't. The mind is uncomfortable towards its own feelings, its own experiences that it's having inside the mind, and it feels like the way to solve this is to push a person away or to push the situation away. This is called aversion. Or you might become bitter and hostile or harsh towards a certain individual. And this doesn't solve the problem either, because that person ends up potentially leaving out of your life. And then the mind can also put its expectations on people, trying to control people to do things your way. And as long as the mind is doing this, where you're pushing people away, you're being bitter and harsh and hostile, and you're putting your expectations on people, you can't live harmoniously with all beings. The mind finds that there's fewer and fewer and fewer people that you can spend time with. So the reason why craving and anger exist in the mind is because of the third poison, or this third unwholesome root, or this third fire, which is ignorance or delusion, or the unknowing of true reality, the confusion, the misperception, the unknowing or the wrong views of reality, the misunderstandings that the mind has, that it doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It doesn't have the wisdom of the natural laws of existence that are found in Gotama Buddha's teachings. And as long as the mind has these misunderstandings, or this ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality, then craving and anger will continue to exist. Because with the ignorance, the mind thinks that this anger that you're experiencing is caused by some external thing. And it's not caused by this external thing. It's caused by the mind's own craving, desire, attachment. So as long as the mind remains ignorant or unknowing of true reality, lacking wisdom, then it's going to stay stuck in this cycle of craving something, chasing after that. In some cases you get it, but then ultimately the mind ends up in the painful feelings. Or you chase after it, you don't get it, and you end up in the painful feelings. And now you just keep experiencing this over and over and over again, because the mind doesn't realize that it's causing its own painful feelings. So this is the three poisons from somewhat of a higher level. Now I'm going to go in and talk about each one of them individually, and then I'll give you guys a chance to ask questions for each individual poison, so that you can be sure that you understand what it is, the symptoms of it, and then how to actually eradicate it with the particular antidote or solution. So this craving, desire, attachment, we've been talking about this at different times in the program so far. This is the mind's burning desire, this never-ending thirst, the longing, the yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting lasting satisfaction, and trying to feel fulfilled or whole or complete based on some object that the mind is chasing after. The mind can almost become obsessive as it chases after these various objects of its affection. You might feel like the mind is pulling towards something, or there's this strong eagerness, almost like it's chasing this unattainable goal or this unobtainable object that is just chasing and chasing and chasing. This is like desire, attachments, wants, expectations, grasping outside of yourself, thinking that something's going to provide lasting satisfaction. The mind is holding on. So if you were maybe chasing after a certain job, you might have been obsessively chasing this job, wanting it so badly, thinking that it's the absolute best thing in the world that you could ever get. And then you chase it and chase it and chase it and chase it. And then you actually maybe get that particular job. And you get so happy and you get so excited that you've gotten that particular job. But then one of the challenges is that maybe 3 years later, 5 years later, as you're working on this job, thinking it's the best job ever, wanting it to last a really long period of time or forever, at some point this job is over. Maybe you get fired, you get laid off, maybe the company goes out of business, and now 3 years later, 5 years later, you're sad or you're angry, you're frustrated because the mind is no longer getting its cravings fulfilled. And oftentimes these things are spread apart so far from each other, the unenlightened mind doesn't understand what's actually happening. It doesn't realize the reason why you're experiencing these painful feelings 3 years or 5 years later is because you allowed the mind to get those conditioned pleasant feelings when you first got the job. And because of those conditioned feelings, those conditions aren't permanent. You can't have this job permanently. So when the conditions changed, now the mind ended up in these painful feelings. So a Buddha is awakening to these and being able to see these natural laws very clearly so that then they can explain it to you and you can learn, you can reflect, independently verify and see the truth for yourself, that what is being explained is the truth. And then you practice to transform this. So one example that I'm sharing here is like a job, if you've ever had a job. Or say you have a bank account and you really want this bank account to have a certain balance. And you chase and chase and chase and chase and you get all the way up to that bank account balance. And now you got to that bank account balance, what it is that you wanted. And maybe you're happy for a period of time. Maybe for a few weeks, the mind is happy. But then because of your craving, now you want more. And you're no longer happy anymore. With whatever amount that you have, you want more. So now you chase and chase and chase and chase and chase, keep chasing and keep chasing and keep chasing, and maybe you get to that goal. But then that happiness that you get at that point, it's only temporary. It only lasts for a period of time. So now the mind sets a new goal, either with your bank account, or you might start chasing after something else. You might chase a new pair of shoes, or you might chase a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife or a bigger house or a nicer car or some clothing or something else. The mind just keeps chasing after things, wanting the objects of its affection, thinking that this external thing is going to provide lasting satisfaction. It's almost like the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction, and the mind thinks this is true, so it feels justified in its chase. And in some cases, when you get those pleasant feelings of happiness or excitement, you feel like, wow, it was worthwhile because you got what you wanted, which was those pleasant feelings. But you don't see that those pleasant feelings are just temporary. They arise, they change, and they fade away. And ultimately, the mind ends up right back where it was, which was in those painful feelings. And now, because the mind lacks wisdom, it starts to now chase other cravings. You know, it can be sex, it can be gambling, it can be money, it can be a new job, a new boyfriend, a new girlfriend, new clothes, a new car, some other thing. The mind just constantly chases after all these different things. So the way to solve this is through training the mind with breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. Ultimately, it's the Eightfold Path that's going to transform all of these poisons, but real specifically to show you exactly what's penetrating into eliminating craving or this greed or desire, these wants and expectations, it's breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. But you wouldn't be able to just practice these two things in order to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. You need other things from the Eightfold Path. But here, I'm sharing with you that these are the two things that are actually going in almost like a surgical scalpel and cutting out the cravings. So the breathing mindfulness meditation what you're doing is you're cultivating mindfulness or awareness of mind. And ultimately, you're developing awareness of the four foundations of mindfulness. You're training the mind to have awareness of those bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. This is something I taught back when we were exploring the Eightfold Path on those two different occasions. So the mind needs to develop these four foundations of mindfulness and develop the concentration to go along with it. Because when you're focused on the breath in meditation, you're aware of the mind. You're starting to become aware of the mind. You're starting to develop concentration. And then when the mind moves off the breath, you're cutting that off. You're letting it go and bringing the mind back to the breath. So your goal isn't to eliminate the thoughts during breathing mindfulness meditation. You can get to a period of time where the mind is quieted and stilled, and you have these long gaps in between, and then there's ultimately a thought. Early on in your practice, your mind might be bombarded with thoughts, or you might indulge in a thought, follow it for a period of time, and then realize you need to bring it back to the breath. But what this is doing is it's actually training the mind to have that awareness, that you're aware that the mind's off the breath, that you're having concentration to be able to focus on the breath. And when the mind moves off the breath, you're building the ability to easily let go. Let go, let go, let go. Because with craving and clinging, the mind is holding on. It's chasing after things. And you need to be able to let go. And the unenlightened mind doesn't want to do that. The unenlightened mind has this craving, so it's holding on to things very tightly. So by you developing your meditation practice 2 or 3 times a day, building up to 30 minutes or more over a period of time, this can take 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to it. But as you build up to that, the mind gets more and more trained to be able to let go, to let go, to let go. So now these qualities that you're building in meditation, where you have mindfulness or awareness of mind, you have concentration, and you're able to easily let go, now you can be aware of the mind, not only in meditation, but in daily life too. That as you see the mind's longing and yearning, and it's chasing things, it's having cravings, you can notice that with your mindfulness and then cut it off and let it go. That's key to getting to enlightenment, that you're not just training in meditation, but you're training in daily life too. So when you're walking through the mall and you notice that your mind's pulling towards some object and it's longing and yearning for this thing, you can cut that off and let it go. You can bring the mind back and say, no, 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 no. I know where that craving leads. It leads to painful feelings. There might be some pleasant feelings here and there along the way, but it's ultimately going to lead to painful feelings because whatever the mind's chasing after is impermanent. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is a key solution that you're going to need in order to transform these 3 poisons, transforming this poison of craving, desire, attachment, where the mind can let go. And then you're also practicing generosity. You need to build this up in your life where you're sharing your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. You're giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return. So you might share your time with individuals. You might share your resources with various individuals. And you need to do this from the middle way. You can't crave your practice of generosity. If you chase that, you'll ultimately deplete your resources and you won't have the things that you need in order to sustain your life. But if you never practice generosity, the mind would be quite selfish, because when there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, it tends to hold on with a lot of selfishness. It doesn't want to give and share with other beings. So what you're looking to do is practice generosity, where you're willing to give and share. And this will help to train the mind to let go. Right now, if you're having trouble with that, or you find that you don't share with others very readily, then you'll need to develop this practice in your life where you're willing to give and share in different situations that you're in without any expectation of anything in return, that you don't want anything. You're just sharing for the sake of enhancing the quality of your mind. So let me pause here and see what questions you guys might have, if any at all. You can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. Okay, it looks like we have a question coming in here on YouTube. How do I get over craving a partner, even craving friendships and being lonely? I can't imagine living without connection in my life, it has gotten so bad at times, I think, I don't want to be here. Yes, so the mind can have any number of cravings, David. And one of the cravings that a mind can have is a craving for a partner. And there's these teachings that I'm sharing with you here to practice breathing mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, that you need to be practicing that on a consistent, ongoing basis. If you haven't built up your meditation practice and your practice of generosity, the mind's going to still be holding on and holding on and holding on. So you need to develop that readily and be sure that you're consistently building that up, being diligent and determined about building up your meditation and your practice of generosity. It's going to take some time to train the mind to let go. Ultimately, you might decide to have a partner, and you can get to enlightenment and still have a partner. There's two ways to actually eliminate a craving, desire, attachment. We're going to be getting into this when we get into chapter 13 of this program. You can do what I'm describing here, which is using breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. And then when you notice the craving coming up, you can cut it off and let it go. And this is the way to eliminate a craving. But also you can fulfill a craving. And that's one of the ways to eliminate a craving too. So by getting an actual partner. But the challenge is if you have these strong cravings for a partner, just getting a partner isn't going to actually solve the discontent mind. It's just going to allow the mind to continue to crave. And if you have craving in your relationship, you might smother it. You might suffocate it. You might sabotage it with your cravings. So one of the best things you can do is build up your life practice, do all this work that you can develop the Eightfold Path and dial that in closer and closer. And then as you're practicing things like right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, as you're practicing that more and more, if you still find that you really want to have a partner and you're having a craving for this, and the best way for you to eliminate it is to get a partner, then get a partner. But be sure that you're training your mind to understand how to practice true love, love without attachment, which is what we're going to be discussing in chapter 15, and that you're practicing the Eightfold Path. Because if you're not practicing the Eightfold Path, you can be sabotaging your relationship and actually going through 2, 3, 4, 5 different relationships where you get attached to an individual, you smother the relationship, it breaks up, you have painful feelings because of that. You go through a period of time where you're experiencing those painful feelings, then you get another relationship, you smother that one, and now over and over and over again, it's just like a continuous cycle. So doing this inner work on your own mind to be able to develop your life practice will ensure that when you ultimately do decide to have a partner, because it sounds like that's probably going to be what you end up doing, that you'll be in a good place to be able to have a healthy relationship with this person and you won't sabotage your relationships. So that's the first thing to understand as it relates to a partner and developing your life practice and working to eliminate your cravings through breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, but also through potentially fulfilling your craving, because there's no harm in having a partner. You know, if you had a craving for cocaine, for example, I wouldn't say, go snort cocaine, right? That would be unwise. That would cause harm. But these types of cravings that are harmless, even though any craving is going to produce unwholesome results, but ultimately if you got a partner and you developed a healthy, sustainable relationship, there's no harm in that, right? So that's why you would like to choose, if you're going to go into a relationship, to do it with the least amount of craving as you can, so that you have the best possible chance to be successful when you get into a relationship. Because it's not a matter of just getting a partner. It's about getting a partner and choosing wisely who to be your partner, and then being successful with that partner. And if you haven't cultivated the wisdom in your life practice, you're not going to choose wisely to have a certain type of partner. And then when you get into that relationship, you're not going to function wisely. So ultimately, it's going to end in difficult situations. So you'd like to do as much work as you can on your own through these teachings that I share with the Eightfold Path and others, so that once you finally do get into a relationship, that you've made a wise choice and you'll be most successful in that relationship. Thank you for your question, David. Okay, it looks like we have a question coming in here from Mayu Lee. She's saying, hello, teacher and classmates. I have a question. I enjoy eating healthy food. Mostly I tend to overeat. While eating, I know intellectually that is time to stop and the stomach is almost 80% full. But the mind managed to persuade to go above 100% full. What technique can I use to help overcome the mind with the craving to overeat? I am doing mindfulness and loving kindness meditation on a regular basis. So it's the same thing, that you would like to do breathing mindfulness meditation and practicing generosity. And then as you notice the craving coming up, you're going to need to cut that off and let it go, and cut that off and let it go. You're going to need to be diligent. You're going to have to cut it back many times. It's kind of like a wild bush, that this wild bush is growing and you cut it back, but then it grows some more, and you cut it back and it grows some more. And you got to keep cutting it back and cutting it back until you uproot it out of the mind. So if you notice that you're having a particular craving, like you're having craving for food, you can actually combine this with your generosity, because you know that the mind craves food and it's holding on and it's longing and yearning for this food. You can actually practice generosity with food, and you'll notice that the mind will have a tendency to let it go more easily. So if you go to the grocery store and you're buying a bunch of food for yourself, buy some extra for your neighbors, and then go around and give this out occasionally, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. Find ways at work or at home or other places to give away food and practice generosity. The mind needs to be trained that it acquires food and then it gives it away. And this is going to help the mind to release its craving to food. But still, in the moment, you're going to need to observe and notice that the mind's craving and cut it off. And that's where your breathing mindfulness meditation is going to come in, that you can be observant when the mind is longing and yearning while you're eating or maybe before you eat. And one of the things that you might pay attention to is sometimes eating more frequently, you'll tend to crave less. Whereas if you go long periods of time between your meals, you might have deeper cravings for food. So eating smaller meals more frequently can keep the mind and the body a bit more satisfied. But always be sure you're looking at practicing the breathing mindfulness meditation, which it sounds like you are, keeping that going, and then coupling that with generosity in all different types of ways. But now that you see that you have this craving to food, you can practice generosity, and that will help you. I noticed one time that my son had a craving for popcorn, and he was eating a lot of popcorn. So one of the things we did is we popped a whole bunch of popcorn, we bagged it up, and he went around the village and he handed out popcorn to his friends in the village. This is one of the things that you can do. So as you notice that your mind is having certain cravings, you can practice generosity around that craving, and that will actually help you. So if you have a craving for money, for example, you can choose to give out money as a gift and choose to make these offerings of money to different people, and this will help you to reduce your craving to money, for example. So you can couple this together and it will really help you. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward with explaining the next poison or the next unwholesome root or the next fire, which is the anger. Because when you're craving, remember what I shared is that you get these pleasant feelings where the mind is chasing after the objects of its affection. If it gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings. But if you don't get what you want, or that condition changes, now the mind ends up in this anger. And that's this next poison or this next unwholesome root that we're going to be talking about. This is where the mind has this aggression or hostility, this bitterness, this resentment. The mind becomes hostile towards others because the mind is not understanding what the real problem is. The mind doesn't understand the craving is the actual problem. Because it doesn't understand the actual problem, it perceives the actual problem as being external. It perceives that the problem is this person, maybe your life partner, your parents, your children, your coworkers, somebody like this that's in your life. You think that the anger you're experiencing is coming from them, so you might be bitter and hostile and harsh towards them. This is almost like an animal growling and roaring when it doesn't get what it wants towards this other individual. The mind has these unpleasant feelings and these unpleasant circumstances, so it acts out. The mind's craving for permanent satisfaction, but it can't get that in the unenlightened state as long as there's craving. So it's going to end up moving to this anger or this hostility, treating its own feelings like an internal enemy. And now it will either push the person away, or it will push the situation away, or it will become bitter and harsh and hostile, or the mind will put its expectations on others. And you can see that this doesn't work, because if this was the true problem, if the problem was external, meaning your parents, your life partner, your children, your coworkers, or somebody else, if you push those people out of your life, then everything would be completely peaceful in your life. But it's not, because you keep getting angry again, or you get irritated again, or you get frustrated again. It's just a matter of time before one of your cravings aren't getting fulfilled. So you just get angry or irritated or frustrated again about something else. So as long as you keep pushing people away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem, you'll keep having the problem over and over and over again, because that doesn't solve the problem. And now you can't live harmoniously with all individuals. And then, as I mentioned, the mind can often become bitter and hostile and harsh towards an individual or a group of individuals. And then those people might choose to leave out of your life or reject you as part of this bitterness and hostility that's coming from you. Or you might put your expectations on people, trying to control them because you're trying to get your cravings fulfilled. And you think if you can just get people to do things your way and fulfill those cravings, that everything would be perfect. But it's not, because you can't control 8 billion people to do things your way. And even if you could, then those cravings would be fulfilled for a period of time, but then the conditions would change. So you need to eliminate the anger, the hatred, the bitterness, the hostility, the resentment, this aversion of pushing people away. And the way that you do this is with loving kindness meditation. You're practicing this on a consistent, ongoing basis. Essentially, what you're doing in the unenlightened state is when you have these certain cravings and they don't get fulfilled, you go down this well-worn path of anger and bitterness and hostility. And you know where that path leads is it leads to broken relationships. And the path has this well-worn out grass. It has the branches pushed back, the stickers are pushed back, and it ends with broken relationships. So the mind is kind of wired to do that in the unenlightened state, is that when you don't get what you want, there's this anger that comes out because the mind goes through this path of anger. But what you're looking to do with loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in your daily life is go down this new path. You need to forge this new path. You need to create this new path. You need to rewire the mind. So you need to get out your machete and you need to chop through the bushes and the branches and create this new path. And this is why it can oftentimes feel like a struggle and very challenging, because the mind wants to be angry. It wants to go down this well-worn path because it's really easy for the mind to walk down that path. But you're trying to forge this new path and create these new wires in the mind, essentially. You're trying to decouple this anger and break that up so that now you can rewire the mind to experience loving kindness, which loving kindness is the exact opposite of anger, hatred, and ill will. Loving kindness is this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, this active goodwill. That's what loving kindness is. And it's going to feel challenging to go down this new path, because when an individual has aversion and you push somebody away, you typically build a wall between you and them. And now the mind doesn't want to break down that wall. It feels justified in creating this wall. It thinks that this wall is protecting you, but it really isn't. It's just allowing the resentment and hostility to continue to reside in the mind. So you need to break down this wall. You need to get out your machete and your tools and forge this new path. And it's the loving kindness meditation that you're doing regularly that is rewiring the mind to have nothing but active goodwill and this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. So loving kindness meditation is like filling up your gas tank. And now you go out in the world and you practice loving kindness through your intentions, your speech, and your actions, where you're not judging other beings to determine whether they deserve your loving kindness. You're just being loving and kind with everybody, no matter what, that you're practicing through your intention, speech, and actions. And this is part of the Eightfold Path. If you study the Eightfold Path with the original words of the Buddha, then you saw where he taught non-ill will or harmlessness. And he taught to speak with loving kindness. And he taught to ensure that we're not causing harm through our bodily actions. He gives you individual details about the natural law of Gotama to be able to see how to practice loving kindness on a daily basis through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. So the loving kindness meditation is building up the loving kindness in the mind so it can be permeating. And now you can go out into the world and you can practice loving kindness through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And this will help to eliminate the anger, hatred, and ill will. It will liberate the mind from the anger, hatred, and ill will. So you can be free of those strong feelings. And this is where more and more of the brightness and the radiance, the peace and the joy of the enlightened mind will shine through. So let me pause here and see if you guys have any questions on this particular poison. Again, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to go to the next poison because it's this next poison that is keeping these other two in place. So even though we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality, it's really because of ignorance or unknowing of true reality that craving and anger continues to exist. If it wasn't for this last poison, craving and anger wouldn't actually exist in the mind. Because what this ignorance or delusion or misunderstanding or misperception or confusion is the mind has these wrong views of reality. It doesn't understand things as they truly are in the world. It has these distortions of mind. It has these misperceptions and misunderstandings. I tend to refer to this as the unknowing of true reality, where the mind has this unknowing of the natural laws of existence. It has this confusion in the mind. In the unenlightened mind, we firmly believe that other people are causing us to be angry. We firmly believe that this situation is annoying us, but that's because it's a belief. We don't know what's true or false in the unenlightened state when we just have beliefs and we're functioning on beliefs. But when you awaken your mind to the wisdom of the Buddha, you can see the truth for yourself that the mind is causing its own discontent feelings. Because of craving, the mind experiences anger. But all of this is occurring because of its ignorance, that it hasn't yet cultivated the wisdom that it needs in order to eradicate craving and eradicate the anger, that it needs the tools and the techniques. It needs the wisdom of the Buddha in order to be able to understand what the problems are and what the solutions are. So cultivating wisdom is what actually leads to the elimination of ignorance, where with craving, you're practicing breathing mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. With anger, you're practicing loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in daily life. Here, what you're doing is you're cultivating wisdom through learning the teachings, through reflecting on them to independently verify them, and then through practicing them in order to transform the mind. You could intellectually understand the teachings of the Buddha to a certain degree and not be practicing them, and you would still have this ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. The unknowing of true reality or ignorance gets fully eradicated when you're actually practicing the teachings. That's where the real transformation is occurring with each one of these poisons. You hear that the craving has the practice of breathing mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. And the anger has the practice of loving kindness meditation and loving kindness. Well, here with the ignorance, the practice is that you're actively learning with dedication, determination, and diligence. You're coming to classes, you're consulting with your teacher, you're reading a book, you're watching videos, you're gaining the wisdom of the teachings of the Buddha, and you're not believing them. You're learning, you're reflecting to independently verify, and then you practice. And as you're lifting out the pollutions out of the mind, you'll see more and more peace and joy come into the mind. So you're going to need to learn things like the Three Universal Truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Five Precepts, the Brahma Viharas, the Natural Law of Gotama, the Seven Factors of Enlightenment, extensive meditation training, learning how to eliminate the 10 fetters, and other things as well. And you would like to do this with the original words of the Buddha. If you're not studying with the original words of the Buddha, you don't have the true teachings of what he actually taught. So therefore, your mind can be confused. So it's very rare to find a teacher that is actually basing what they're teaching on the original words of the Buddha. So you need to have a teacher that's basing what they're sharing with you on the original words of the Buddha. But then you don't believe that teacher and you don't believe those books. You learn, you reflect, independently verify, and you practice. And this is what allows the mind to cultivate wisdom, because you can see the truth for yourself of what's truly transpiring with these natural laws of existence. And then you can cultivate that wisdom and then make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. So all the books that I share with the original words of the Buddha, they're all available at no cost. All the classes and courses and retreats, all of these things are available for you at no cost. So you'll need to acquire these books. You'll need to acquire the original words of the Buddha. You're going to need to dive into them. But you do that as a goal, as an objective, as an interest. Because if you chase after enlightenment as a craving, you won't actually get it. But also, if you're indifferent and you didn't really do anything to cultivate the mind and you were just lethargic and unmotivated and complacent, you're not going to experience improvements and results there either. So you just need to gradually and consistently work towards the goal. So that's why these classes are on Sundays and Wednesdays, so that you can gradually learn. And as you miss classes, you can listen to the recordings and things like this, that you can just gradually build up your practice, slowly but surely, right? Not too slow, but not too fast either, just gradually working towards the goal. And this is what's ultimately going to eradicate all the pollutions, not just craving, anger, and ignorance, but all the pollutions, those 10 fetters. That's how you ultimately learn the entire path to enlightenment, is by eradicating ignorance and getting to wisdom. And when you finally get to enlightenment and the mind's been peaceful and calm and serene, content with joy for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you will know that you are experiencing enlightenment. And the Buddha refers to this as final knowledge, that you've acquired final knowledge, that the mind is now fully cultivated all the wisdom that it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. And you will know those teachings that it took for you to get to enlightenment inside and out, backwards and forwards. You'll be able to discuss them with ease if you've attained this mental state, because you would have needed to study them and practice them, and then study them some more and practice them some more and tweak them some more and practice them some more. You would need to be doing this on a regular, consistent basis. So by the time your mind fully gets to enlightenment, you will understand the teachings very well, and you'll be able to discuss them at ease if somebody had a question for you about any of the teachings. So this is the third poison of ignorance or delusion. Do you guys have any questions on this one at all? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Mayu Lee has a question on Facebook. She says, I find that the mind is very stubborn. Although I understand that only this mind can cause myself discontent, but I still manage to get discontent when hearing disagreeable comments. That's because you still have craving, desire, attachment. Your mind's not fully transformed yet. The mind isn't enlightened yet. There's still pollutions in the mind. This is one of the struggles on the path to enlightenment, is you get to a certain point in your development that you intellectually understand. You intellectually understand that you're causing your own discontentedness. You intellectually understand that it's craving. You understand some of these teachings, but yet the mind still can't practice them because it's still got that ignorance or that unknowing of true reality. It still has a lack of wisdom. So you're going to go through periods of time where you learn certain teachings and you realize what's going on in the mind, but the mind just can't quite practice it yet fully the way that the mind wants to practice it. So that's why it's called a practice. You're developing your life practice. And what I encourage students to do is, even when they get to enlightenment, is to not convince themselves that they're enlightened. Just always be dedicated, determined, and diligent to continue to develop your practice. So you're going to go for several years as you're developing your practice where you're going to be discontent sometimes. It's going to happen. But what you would like to do is investigate those cravings, what cravings are in there that are causing this, and you'd like to cut them off and let them go and stay consistent with it and get help from your teacher as you're noticing certain cravings, or maybe you can't figure out what cravings your mind is having. You're going to need to reach out and get help through asking questions in class, posting in the Facebook group, scheduling personal guidance sessions or maybe sending a personal message. So the reason why your mind is still getting discontent is because it's still unenlightened. It still has craving, it still has anger, and it still has ignorance. You haven't fully cultivated all the wisdom that you need. And it's going to be a gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. One of the biggest myths about the lifetime of the Buddha is people think that he sat down under a tree, he meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't true. And this is why some people, they will just be so into meditation, and that's what they're doing, is just meditate, 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 meditate. This isn't going to produce enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment with just meditation. It's impossible. But you also wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without meditation either. You need meditation, but you need all these other teachings as well to be able to understand the mind and these natural laws. So you're going to go through periods of time where your mind is peaceful perhaps for a few days or a few weeks, but then there's going to be some craving that isn't getting fulfilled, and you're going to be angry or frustrated or otherwise discontent. And the real secret to all of this, which isn't a secret because the Buddha describes it very clearly, it's in his teachings, but the real underlying challenge that most unenlightened minds experience is they aren't aware of those conditioned pleasant feelings. They're not aware of the happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, and the mind just continues to chase those. And then when you get those conditioned pleasant feelings are there for a period of time, but then the mind ultimately ends up in the painful feelings and you don't know why. You can't figure it out. So to get ahead of the curve, doing the breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, yes, but you need to stay attentive and alert. You need to have that mindfulness awareness of mind of the pleasant feelings. Don't allow the mind to get those conditioned pleasant feelings, because as soon as it gets a conditioned pleasant feeling, it's only a matter of time before it gets to a painful feeling. It's going to happen. It's only a matter of time. So you would like to cut off and let go of those conditioned pleasant feelings before they're even a feeling, as a bodily sensation. That's the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If you can cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation before it becomes a feeling, now you've actually saved your mind the whole difficulty of having a conditioned feeling. Since it didn't have the conditioned pleasant feeling, it's not going to have the conditioned painful feeling. Now you can get to the unconditioned joy or the unconditioned happiness, where you don't have these bunch of conditions that need to be met in order to be happy. Instead, you can have unconditioned happiness, where you're just always happy, you're just always joyful. So yes, this is part of the path, Mayuli, that you need to continue to cultivate the path. You need to continue to meditate, continue to dial in each one of those 8 factors of the Eightfold Path closer and closer, and that's what's ultimately going to transform the mind. And there you need to be patient with that, because it's going to take multiple months and even years for you to accomplish that. Remind yourself, it took the Buddha 6 years to get to enlightenment, so it's going to take you some time, right? I would say that it's going to take you at least 6 years. Not everybody's going to take 6 years. There's some students that have been learning with me that just in a matter of a year that they've been able to really make some significant progress and maybe even close to enlightenment. But they were also doing work before that, before they ever met me. But once they got the true teachings of the Buddha, whoa, then they really started to experience real benefits. So it's going to take you some time, and just be patient with it. That's part of what the enlightened mind is going to do, is it's going to have a cultivated patience. So you'll need to develop that as part of a wholesome quality in the mind. I see your comment there. Yes, patience is key. I need to remind myself that. Yep. So it's about being patient, but also being consistent, right? And if you slip up and you miss a meditation, don't beat yourself up, but just continue to stay with it, right? Just continue to stay with it. Just know and have confidence that you're headed in the right direction, and just stick with it. Don't give up. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So let me move to the last thing that I have to share with you guys, and then I'll just see if there's any last minute remaining questions before we finish up the class. Is I would like to just share this summary with you guys, that what we talked about today is we talked about the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. These are known as craving, anger, and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. That word ignorance is nowadays used in kind of a derogatory way. The Buddha wouldn't have spoken in a derogatory way, looking down on people and calling people ignorant. So that's why I like to use this phrase, unknowing of true reality, or confusion or misunderstanding. That's what the mind is truly experiencing. It's not this derogatory way of referring to an individual. So these are the three poisons, and I found that these words actually work best, that people tend to understand craving, anger, and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. But you will see other teachers use greed, hatred, and delusion, or desire, ill will, and confusion. So these three unwholesome roots have antidotes, or the wholesome roots. The wholesome roots are generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. That's what you would like to practice in terms of transforming your mind, is practice generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. This is what will help to uproot the unwholesome roots. So you're essentially bringing in the wholesome roots to uproot and eliminate the unwholesome roots. And it's through eradicating these three unwholesome roots and cultivating the wholesome roots that you can eliminate 100% of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. You'll be able to eliminate all unwholesome karma production. That's what the Eightfold Path is doing for you. That when you learn and you practice the Eightfold Path closer and closer, gradually dialing that in, you'll get to a point where you're not making any unwise decisions anymore. That you're going to be practicing in a way that you're only functioning through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, and now you're making wiser and wiser decisions all the time. So this takes time. You're going to need patience, but this is what will lead to your enlightenment. And this is a certain level of understanding that you need. And the Buddha's Eightfold Path is helping you to eradicate these three poisons, but you need to understand it in this way as well, so that you can observe, there's the craving, there's the anger, there's the unknowing of true reality, or the ignorance. And now what do you do to transform that? And you bring in the wholesome roots of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So let me know if you guys have any last minute remaining questions. I'll just open up to all of those if you guys have anything else that's remaining, whether it's about the three poisons, the three unwholesome roots, the three fires, or the wholesome roots, or if there's anything about the path to enlightenment that you would like to ask questions about, you're welcome to ask questions. You can even ask questions about our classes and retreats and all those different things as well. So it looks like Francis has his hand up. Francis, if you would like to go ahead and ask your question, you're welcome to.
Okay, good evening to you, David. Okay, I have this question regarding attachment. It's not related to today's topic. It came out to me today as while reflecting and reading the book, The Life Practice. It's about the attachment during dying moments. I know I asked you this before. You've given me the answers, but today something came up in my mind. They say that I have these three ways that I would like to be during the dying moments and all that. Let me know if these three ways, is this still attachment or is it not attachment? Yeah. The first one is today that I tell myself that I'm going into nothingness. There's nothing out there, I just blank, it's nothing. So I'm going freely away. During dying moments, I'm going away freely. There's nothing there. The second one is that I thought that maybe I want to chant the Namo Tassa Bhagavata, the chanting a few times over and over again until I don't breathe anymore. Yeah. The final one I thought that maybe is I can feel thankful and grateful for everything and for everyone that has been in my life, and I feel joy and delight in the very moment. So please enlighten me with this. With your thoughts on these three things that I would like to do during dying moments.
Okay, so everything you just described is fine. There's no harm in what you just described. If your mind's going to be thinking about those things, that's just fine. But what I would encourage you to do is not to be worried about your dying moments and not crave or cling to any particular thing that you're going to need to be doing when you die, because that's the mind craving and clinging, right? It's longing and yearning, and now your mind has to hold on to these three things all the way to the point where you're going to die, and you're going to have to remember these three things. So there's no harm in what you just described, and those are all very wholesome things. Instead, what I would encourage you to do is focus on the present moment, what you need to be doing right now in the present moment to get to the next part of your journey to enlightenment. So just look at the next step in front of you. If you're climbing a mountain, you're not going to be thinking about, or at least I wouldn't encourage you to do this, to think about what you're going to be doing when you get on top of the mountain, right? The top of the mountain has a great view. There's lots of fresh air. Yeah, it's going to be wonderful when you get to the top of the mountain, but you're never going to get there if you don't think about the next step of getting up the mountain. You got to think of one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. So rather than thinking about what you're going to do at the top of the mountain and hold on to that all the way up the mountain, instead, just look at the present moment and what do you need to do next? What is your next step? Is it building your breathing mindfulness meditation? Is it doing your loving kindness meditation? Is it understanding the Eightfold Path more closely and dialing that in? Is it understanding the three poisons? Is it understanding the 10 fetters? Is it the 5 precepts? Is it the natural law of Gotama? Focus on these things. This is the next step for you. I don't know your practice 100%, Francis, even though we've talked a few times. I don't know exactly where you are in your practice, but you should. So you should know what is that next thing that you need to learn and understand. What is the next step? So what you just described is fine, but I don't suggest you hold on to that and think about your dying moments of you've got to be doing something specific when you die, because that's the craving and clinging that the mind has. That's the longing and yearning in the future. You would like to just think of the present moment and what do I need to do right now in this moment? What's my next step?
Yeah, I thought the same thing too, that I reflected again deeper. That I think there's still attachment, that I have a yearning, a longing, like you mentioned, about things to do. Yes, I actually following whatever you have taught in the book and through our classes, being mindful of all the things, what I need to do every day based on the teachings of the Buddha. Yeah, so in that case, what I do is I just continue my journey on a daily basis, reflecting and be mindful of all the teachings of Buddha to apply them. So I got it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Francis. And while we're talking, there was a question you posted on your Facebook page about.
I didn't want to reply you back because I thought today I'll talk to you. You mentioned that on this January something, the date you have a new online class. Is it going to be in the time 10, is it 10 a.m. or p.m. the Thai time?
So all the classes that I start here in Thailand, for the majority of them, they're either starting at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. But that course that you saw, it starts at 9 a.m. each day. And that's Thai time. So wherever you are, you just need to adjust it for your local time zone. And I'm going to be teaching it here in Chiang Mai at the temple. And I'm also going to be live streaming that particular course that you asked about.
So it's only one time in the day. It's not repeated like the night time. It's only 9 a.m. Thai time, yeah?
That particular program, that particular course, it starts at 9 a.m. and then we finish at 3 p.m. each day. And we have individual classes throughout that day.
It's a retreat. It's a retreat, yeah.
Exactly. Most people would probably call it a retreat. I call it a course. So it's a Monday. It's a Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Okay, sure. Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions anywhere else. Let's see, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So I'll just end class by thanking you guys for attending. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your dedication and diligence to learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. On our next class, next Sunday, we're going to be in chapter 9 of this book, which is titled, What is Gama and How Does It Affect Me? As I've shared in other times of this program, is everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to the natural law of Gama. But now we're going to go in and actually describe and investigate and understand the natural law of Gama itself. So even things like the 5 precepts, the Eightfold Path, other things like this, he's teaching you the natural law of karma through his teachings, but he's just not necessarily calling it out in those situations. But now we're going to go in and actually study the natural law of karma itself. So that's what we're going to be doing next Sunday. It's chapter 9. And you can download this book if you don't already have it, or you can take it and go print it once you download it, or you can order it on Amazon if you have access to Amazon, or if you're here in Chiang Mai, you can come to the temple and we have them there. So you would like to be reading along with studying in the class. And then as you can't make the live classes, you can always listen to the recording on Facebook, YouTube, or on the podcast. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be starting with our breathing mindfulness meditation. Now for the rest of the group learning program, 1 week I'm going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation on Wednesday. The next week's going to be loving kindness meditation. And we're going to be rotating those back and forth because I did a 4-part series on breathing mindfulness meditation. Then I did a 4-part series on loving kindness meditation. Then I did a 4-part series on Buddhist chanting, where now for the rest of the group learning program, we're just going to be rotating back and forth between breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation, because this is what you really need to develop in order to eradicate the craving and the anger from the mind. And you should be developing this on your own as well, but you have the opportunity to come to class, meditate together, and then I make myself available for any questions that you guys might have on all these online classes. But on Wednesday, it's just a free-form question day. You guys can ask any and all questions that you like. So thank you all for joining for today's class. Perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.